So good evening here in Edith Marian House near the Goetheanum, and also friends in other places around the world. Hopefully we have a very special theme tonight here, and the main central focus is this Easter event in 1924 here on the hill of the Goetheanum. The title is the Easter Lectures, but lectures were only part of, I would say, a spiritual event which happened here 100 years ago. And many of us focused so much on the Christmas conference. And there were 1,000 people here in the Christmas conference now and worldwide. But sometimes I have the feeling that we forget Easter. And it was the first anthroposophical gathering, a big gathering after the Christmas conference, was this Easter conference. And there is a strong continuation from the Christmas conference to this Easter conference. On the level of the foundation stone meditation, it was the first time that it was on the stage in Eurythmy, Easter Sunday. But it's only one aspect. And on the other side, it was Dr. Steiner's last Easter event on earth. And that means something for not only his biography, but it was really his farewell Easter event. And insofar, I had a feeling that we should concentrate on it. What happened here, how he did it, what are some important messages or outlines, perspectives coming from this Easter 24 for us now, 100 years later. And now we are so close to Easter. Good Friday will be tomorrow. And this special day today, Monday, Thursday, the day when the Christ gave his last words, more or less, his farewell speeches to the disciples, and also the so-called hohenpriesterliches Gebet, this high priestly prayer. So in the St. John's Gospel, this is absolutely a major event tonight in the sense of the New Testament. And insofar there are interesting, moving circumstances tonight, and how to come into this Easter mood. It is not as easy as we think sometimes. Steiner once mentioned that the Easter days are the days in which human soul can actually have deepest experiences, the depth of the innermost, he said. So there is a special access to the mysteries of our own soul, to essential matters, he said. So every human soul has at Easter time a special access to the mystery of mankind. And insofar, from the point of view of the general anthroposophical section, we wanted to invite you tonight to come together, at least some of you in far distance, and some friends are here, not to forget about these necessary elements. And I know that some Irish friends join tonight because in Ireland, in the Irish society, we had an unexpected loss when last Sunday, Palm Sunday, Helen Comerford passed away. Helen was one of the most gifted artists in the whole worldwide anthroposophical movement. And whoever saw her paintings, let's say the paintings about the 19 class lessons, she collected these paintings in a little booklet called the 19s, and also other paintings who were also present yesterday in the farewell ceremony. Whoever had the ability to see these paintings or to come into a personal encounter with Helen, this was a new step, I would say, of development of anthroposophy on earth. And now she went away, or we can't say away, but in a way she transformed her own existence. So I want to dedicate also this evening lecture to her and the Irish friends. So coming back to my first point, it was the first important meeting after the Christmas conference, and Steiner quite often said in those days, the Christmas conference needs this kind of, yes, he really said refreshments, also in the German translation. If this Christmas meeting is to have the right effect, he said in one of the lectures, it must always be refreshed again, as it is there present by everything that develops out of it. A kind of a refreshment out of the fruits, out of the effects, not only reading again the lectures of the Christmas conference, but going on this path in the line of the Christmas conference and this Easter celebration at the Goetheanum at this time was a first marking step of this development of the Christmas conference. And at the end of these Easter days, I will come soon to the definition, what are the Easter days? But at the end of this Easter events, Dr. Steiner said on the 27th of April, we had such an Easter celebration here in which our Christmas conference, which is significant for our society, fully resonated. So a resonance relationship in between the Christmas conference and the Easter impulse. I mean, we all know that the Christmas conference was not only taking place on Christmas, but it has an element of being born. It was an impulse of something was born anew, but it had to undergo, in a way, death and resurrection. So in a way, it is so important to see Christmas and Easter together, and then also Michael, what happened in September 24. And this will be an important focus in the Goetheanum. This year we have a huge, hopefully huge Michael conference, a high school conference. It is enveloping the last address of Dr. Steiner, but also the class lessons of September. And there will be contributions from all sections. So also Michael is in the perspective and Christmas, but in between Christmas and Michael is at least Easter, also St. John's. So for us from the general section hosting this evening, it was important not to forget this Easter time. And the last point, and then we'll go into the theme. Middle of March, we don't know exactly the dates. Middle of March, Dr. Steiner shaped a model for the second building. So Albert Steffen noted in his notebook, I have seen the model, and this was in the 17th of March. And Dieter Wegmann was all the time there when Dr. Steiner did the model over 3 days. So maybe he did it from the 14th, 15th, 16th, we don't know. Middle of March. So before Easter, in between Christmas and approaching Easter. And then in the 22nd of March, it was brought to the glass house. It was done in his studio. But later on, it was transported to the glass house to the architects because they had to work out drawings for the local authorities to legalize the building project. And this was then done in May. So in between is Easter, and this has also to do something with our Goetheanum building project. I will come back to it right at the end, because the last statement of Steiner at the end of this Easter time was directed toward the building. Now, what is Easter? I don't know, I don't think in a Christological sense now, but what we call the Easter days in 24, or the so-called Easter lectures of Steiner. Classically, these are only 4 lectures in the famous lecture course Easter as a place, as a piece of the history of humanity. Ein Stück Menschheitsmysteriengeschichte. 4 lectures, that means Saturday, Easter Sunday, Easter Monday, and Tuesday. And Steiner called this our Easter course. or our Easter conference. It was a closed lecture cycle for the members of the society, and he announced it also several weeks before. But I would say, if I focused in reflecting about what happened there, this was the core, but it started earlier on Friday evening before, and then it went a whole week after, until a date which is called more in the Catholic tradition, the White Sunday, or Dominica in Albis, Sunday in white robes. This is the first Sunday after the Easter Sunday. Also in the Gospels, it is an enormous date, because when Christ met the disciples as a group, first time again, it was a week afterwards. And I think, in reflecting Steiner's work biography, that the whole week after Easter should be considered as well in this almost 10 days event. And I will give you a little sketch what happened here on the hill in these 10 days, and then I will focus on some themes. And just to mention, a lot of people, they came earlier and they stayed until the 27th. So the 20th of April was Easter Sunday, 100 years ago, and the 27th was the first Sunday after Easter Sunday, and a lot of them took the chance to stay here the whole week, so over 10 days. And it started, in fact, in a way, with a class lesson on Friday evening. It was the 8th class lesson of Dr. Steiner, and there were many new people coming in. And on that day, 18th of April, I counted 120 new admissions to the first class. That means Steiner signed the blue card for 120 new members. One of them was Hilmar af Klint, but this is only the prominentest part. But a lot of people wanted to get access or asked for admission, sent their letters, and Steiner signed the blue card. Many of them were doctors, curative educators, and other people. I will come back to it. But for them, at least, for them who were there, not all of the new members of the high school were locally here, but many came, and then they started, let's say, the Easter event with this 8 class lesson. The Saturday was a more or less silent day, which is typical for Easter Saturday. It is also called the silent day. What we know that Steiner in the evening started a lecture course about Easter and mystery. During the day, I don't know what he did. The only dated thing we have is that he finished this famous painting Easter, the 3 crosses, painting, the watercolor. And it's also interesting because this was meant for the poster for the Eurythmy performance next day. So it's quite late if you prepare a poster and the day before the painting is finished. But in fact, this was quite often how it happened when Steiner was there, that the day before, at least at the day it was there, the 3 crosses. And it was an important Eurythmy performance next day. Sunday morning at 11 o'clock in the big hall of the Schreinerei carpentry shop building, there was this Eurythmy performance, starting with the foundation stone meditation in Eurythmy, and then followed by music of Bach, some poems, Christ poems of especially Albert Steven and Hammerling. And for Steiner, this was an important point. And in his address, he said, today's Eurythmy performance is in the most eminent sense something that has been incorporated into the anthroposophical movement itself. And it was not at all a public Eurythmy performance. It was only for the members. And he said, now you will see these words of wisdom that accompanied the laying of this foundation stone of the Anthroposophical Society. They accompanied, they are not the foundation stone, which always was stressed by Sergei Prokofiev. It's not the same, but they accompanied, he said, Steiner, not Prokofiev at this point, accompanied a process happening in the hearts of the members, in the hearts. They accompanied it, and now, Steiner said, they have the first time they have a eurythmic effect. So it's not only that we can see now a wonderful performance, but something happens here. So, and he said it's so important that the living force of the Christmas conference is going on. And these mantric verses of the foundation stone meditation, now by eurythmy, they run through the anthroposophical movement and impulse it. So the impulse is going. So that for the Goetheanum today, he said in the address, it is the second developmental step in the working of these words. So this is quite something serious. And then Steiner later on said in a reflection, and then we had these wonderful poems, and this gave a kind of consecration mood for the whole Easter conference. And I would say the conference are over until next Sunday, even if Steiner maybe only meant the 4 lectures, I don't know. By the way, on that Easter Sunday, there came a new copy out of the press of the so-called Goetheanum newspaper, including the newsletter for the members. And it's quite interesting what is inside. It is not written the same day by Steiner, a week earlier at least, but it's toward this event. His memories 36 years ago from Vienna, his friends, Lemmermeyer, and then Fercher von Steinwand, this person, where Steiner said, I had the first clear impression about reincarnation, a concrete reincarnation, a living memory. So Fercher von Steinwand was for Steiner the man or the other one who in a way gave the opportunity or raised the opportunity to go beyond his actual wonderful physical appearance, but come into a real perception, not directly, not spontaneously, but this encounter brought something in which was important. So it's just in this news sheet, or now it's in the official part, the Goetheanum, it was written at this time. In the newsletter for the members, there were the next leading thoughts. And on this Sunday, you could read in the newsletter leading thoughts about, about the way of the deceased after letting behind them the astral body. So, which takes a lot of time after we died to work through our own biography, but then there is a certain stage we will reach the true spiritual world and come into direct relationship to the spiritual beings. Easter Sunday. At least these topics were there, and for us now we are reading the leading thoughts maybe, or sometimes we see a eurythmy performance of the foundation stone meditation, or we read a lecture of Steiner. But I think it is important to understand at this time it was one composition. And this formed a strong impulse. When I mentioned that the eurythmy performance was restricted to the members, this was in the morning. But in the afternoon at 5, there was a public eurythmy performance with another 14 pieces of music and poems, also fitting to Christmas, but more, I wouldn't say exoteric, but it was not purely for the members. So I also wanted to respect Mary Steiner's work and of the whole group in the morning at 11, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or it came from the hill. And at the evening, the second of the 4 lectures on mystery sites. I will come back to this topic, of course. And then Easter Monday. It started in the morning with a youth group of young doctors. And they had a very wonderful course. We started on that day. I will come back to it. And afterwards, there was a group of older doctors, not as old as today, but at this time older than the students. And right at the end, very interesting, I don't want to go into these lectures in detail, but I want to mention that at the end of this lecture, Steiner said to the doctors, and we are on Easter Monday morning, it is the very worst thing to think about death in the case of any patient, no matter how seriously ill they are, and you want to cure them. As a doctor, you should almost forbid yourself to think of the patient's death as a possibility. The imponderables have such a strong effect. It is tremendously important force if under all circumstances you keep thinking about death until the very end, and only think about what I can do to save what can be saved in terms of vitality. If such a mindset is developed, many more people will be saved than if the other mindset is developed, which somehow predicts death from these or those things. You should never do so. It is only one element out of a kind of a lesson, ending saying, then you are entitled to have the courage to heal. So this terminus, courage to heal, and this dedication of the doctors to heal as long as possible was also a strong element. Easter Monday in the afternoon again, public eurythmy, and in the evening for the members, the second mystery lecture. Easter Tuesday, the same procedure, the young doctors, the older doctors, but then very unexpectedly at noon, 12 o'clock, a class lesson, which was never done before, as far as I remember, in the middle of the day, 12 o'clock, but it was Easter Tuesday, the 9th class lesson. And then at 5, again, the internal eurythmy performance with the foundation stone meditation, with another address by Steiner, even if the main message is the same, you will hear the words, he said, that were to sink into our hearts at the Christmas conference in order to lay the foundation stone in these hearts for the newly formed Anthroposophical Society. Today, you will see these words translated into eurythmy, and this will take what began at Christmas on one step further. So again, the same image. They were part of the foundation stone laying procedure, and now in eurythmy, a next step of the development of the movement and society. And he's saying it's so important that we are looking always what to make out of it. In the history of anthroposophy, we had a lot of events, Steiner said. But the main task is the continuation, to develop some things out of it. We also had now at the Goetheanum quite a wonderful Christmas conference, but what is the outcome? Where is the development out of it? So we were in a certain hope mood that this first general meeting after the Christmas conference could have the spirit of this Christmas conference. If not, it was only a Christmas conference, but now is the AGM. And then we have a total different mood of the soul, and but this is not at all in Steiner's line. In Steiner's spiritual line is that we have to keep the continuous endeavor of these spiritual impulses and to go on. And on that evening, Easter Tuesday, he ended this mystery course with a fourth lecture. But on Wednesday morning, it went on for the doctors, and you will see later on how these contents of the general anthroposophical lectures and the young doctors' lessons are strongly connected. Or to say, he showed in the medical faculty what is the special meaning of the general anthroposophy in a life field. Or he showed it really how it could be transformed and made in detail on a professional field. So again, on Wednesday they went on, and the older doctors went also on. They could ask questions, Steiner, out of their medical practice. So in the first two meetings, they just could say how to treat tuberculosis and so on. And at the end, one doctor said, it was Dr. Husemann, I don't think that it is very sensible what we do. Very interesting answers, but for a lot of individual demandings. We need more a spiritual teaching, how to come to a spiritual diagnosis. So he wanted to transform a little bit how they did it. And Steiner said, we will think about it. And this was Ita Wegmann and him. And then on this Wednesday, they made quite an astonishing thing. They brought case reports out of their manuscript, Fundamentals for Therapy. So you know that, most of you will know that since November 23, Steiner and Wegmann were working on a medical manuscript. Later on was the book Fundamentals of Therapy. And now they brought the manuscripts. And there is one chapter in this manuscript about single case records out of the Ita Wegmann clinic. And now it was very interesting that Ita Wegmann was reading what they have formulated. So she was the reader and Steiner commented. So she read the chapter, or it was 2 case records, and Steiner sometimes stopped her and then gave a certain explanation, and then she went on to read. It is a total new element in the medical courses of Dr. Steiner that on this Easter Wednesday, they got an insight of what is going on in the medical section, in the innermost medical section in between Steiner and Wegmann, in working for a textbook, but in a way also a collaboration in between. She was not only the reader, I mean, these were patients of her out of the clinic, but there was a collaboration. And they got suddenly, by the question of Husemann, a possibility. And if you think about karma and Christmas conference and Christmas impulse, this is real then. They are really working out of the spirit of the Christmas conference. And now in Easter time, they had the textbook, or at least part of it. And in the evening, karma lecture. Now, the Easter course was finished, but then the first of 3 karma lectures in the second week. Thursday, again, the young doctors in the morning, and also in the evening, kind of not a private meeting with Steiner, but he invited him to come back to the glass house where all the teachings were and to bring other questions. But it was a very interesting, another type of meeting. On Friday morning, again, the young doctors, and then on the evening, the 10th class lesson. And the whole group was admitted to the first class. When they came on Friday to the Sonnenhof, where most of them stayed for those days, not as people with need of assistance, but they had some spaces there with beds or at least on the floor. When they met there on Holy Friday, they got all the admission to the first class. So the whole group experienced 3 class lessons in this Easter 10 days, their medical course, and of course the general anthroposophical lectures. So this was on Friday evening. Saturday morning, now a lecture for the workmen, the workers on the Goetheanum. Very interesting, and it's another theme. And in the evening, there was again a Karma lecture. At 5 before, there was a public eurythmy, another performance with 17 pieces. So what an intensity of art. This was on Saturday, and then the so-called White Sunday. And then the overview is finished, and I go a little bit in the details. On this White Sunday, this was the date of the next issue of the Wochenschrift. You know, the members, they really waited for it. It was what will be in there. I heard that they got it 2 days earlier than the official date, so maybe they could read it on Friday evening before, but the official date was 27. Steiner went still in Vienna in the autobiographical writing, Hammerling, and his first lecture about Goethe, public lecture, about Goethe as the father of new aesthetics. And it is not in the article written, but this was a very decisive point for Steiner, because at the end of the lecture, one of the Cistercienser monks came to him, Professor Neumann, and said, what you brought, all the seeds are in Thomas of Aquinas. And it was a very special encounter for Steiner in between with this Professor Neumann from a point of view of spiritual world history. And in the same article, wonderful description about the philosophy of freedom path in Steiner's biography. And in the leading thoughts at the same copy, same issue, in the news sheets for the members, very interesting about imagination, inspiration, and intuition in relationship to biography, imagination, inspiration in relationship to post-mortal life, and intuition in understanding reincarnation, which was a whole theme in the 10 days of the Easter event. And in the same issue, the people could read Steiner's first report about what happened on Easter, so classical Easter, Easter Sunday at the Goetheanum, and he was to all members internationally writing that this spiritual foundation stone who was laid to the hearts of the members, experienced a kind of a, how to say, he said it was eine Art Auferstehung, a kind of a resurrection in eurythmy now. So for those who were not there, he said there was a kind of resurrection of this spiritual foundation stone in the hearts now here at the Goetheanum. This was this White Sunday. And again, eurythmy at 5, at 8, a third Karma lecture, and yes, I should mention it all as well, at 10 o'clock in the evening, a meeting of the Executive Council, the Vorstand. And more or less after that, Monday, Tuesday, Steiner went to Stuttgart, and on Holy Friday he came from Bern. So in between coming from Bern and going to Stuttgart, there are all these events. And now I want to go a little bit into and bring hopefully a little bit into dialogue elements of these 10 days. And I want to go maybe a bit more extensively into these 4 major lectures about Easter and mystery. Then I will a certain glimpse out of the course for the young doctors, out of the class lessons, and out of the Karma lectures, and it will end, but hopefully at 7, with this last perspective to the building. It will only be some little points, but hopefully we all get tonight a kind of a, yes, a very rough image, but could be maybe, could create an atmosphere also for our next few days, facing now the coming Easter event this year in the season, the spiritual season of the cycle of the year, but hopefully also for our anthroposophical movement and society and the School for Spiritual Science. Because I know I'm talking about the things happened 100 years ago, but they're inscribed. They're really inscribed in our hearts, in our destinies, in our movement. This is not just something out of the past. And even if we think on our friends and also beyond the threshold, this has to do with our destinies here on earth or going to the world of ether. So some little aspects of the 4 lectures on Easter, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Yes, it is a sketch, and it was an approach to Dr. Steiner, as the title says, to Easter as a part of the mystery history of mankind. And I think it is starting with quite a shocking element that he's saying quite often Easter is now linked to a spring festival, to this kind of re-awakening nature, and this makes the Easter aspect. But he said this is wrong. This is the end result of a long confusion. If Easter is kind of the Christian Easter event has a kind of a precedent, has a kind of, but this happened in autumn. If we want to draw a spiritual line from the Christian Easter festival to older traditions, we have to look to an autumn festival. It was always in autumn when the so-called, let's say, the Adonis festival was performed in Crete, in the time of the dying nature. In the time of the dying nature, let's say the Adonis festival, he said, they had there this kind of statue of the god, of a representative of youth and beauty. And by a ritual act, this statue was brought out of the temple to a lake, or even if there was a sea, and was brought into water for 3 days. And not only brought into water, it was accompanied by songs of deepest suffering, mourning. It was a very immense pain created or performed by the community. And in deepest silence, then, they waited for the 3rd day. And then it was taken out of the water, and there were songs of jubilation, the resurrected God. It was a procedure for the mystery of death, and a procedure enabling people to understand what happens in the 3 days after they have died. Going out to the world of ether, and after 3 days, really awakening in the spirit. And what Steiner described as an outer ritual process, what he said, this is an image what happened in the mysteries. The Adonis festival was for everybody, but in the mystery side, in the sacred mystery side, for some, this was even more intensified. When they underwent initiation, they were guided to a black room, a really black room. There was standing a kind of a coffin. And there were also funeral songs. And they had to overcome for 3 days this situation there. You can see on some of the old mystery places, I think also in Mount Odile, where we have in the stone, almost a coffin in the stone. And now they said that they buried the monks there, but it probably was a place for 3 days. Absolutely on the hill, in the stone, being absolutely like this to the ether world. And of course, things had to be done in going through transformation of consciousness. And after 3 days, the initiate or the person who underwent this initiation came back to his normal consciousness, but Steiner said with a new language, with a new script, with the language of the spirit, with the scripts of the spirit. He was now allowed to see, he could now see the world from the point of view of the spirit. So those who underwent a real procedure and not only taking part in the Adonis festival, they got an initiation in the mystery of death. And what happened in the mystery, Steiner said, was still a kind of a picture was going on in the spiritual world. So the outer ritual, the Adonis cultus, was a kind of image, an image of what is going on in the mysteries on a deeper level. And the mysteries was a kind of images what was going on after we really die and go after 3 days to this awakening in the spirit. And Steiner said for thousands of years, it happened like this. For thousands of years. But then at a turning point of time, there came this Christ being from the sun, and in a way made it historically as a fact what was experienced over decades, thousands of years, on the level of the consciousness, but now it was embodied and it happened on earth, this passing and going through death and really going into death. Steiner said to the priests of the Christian community that he fought with Ahriman, the Christ, over 3 days and then the resurrection. So it was even more physical, but a kind of initiation of the earth, we can say, and a new resurrection impulse for the earth and mankind. Then he descended, Christ, to perform an act on earth, after which men could now look. And there is this wonderful blackboard drawing, maybe you remember it. It's a blackboard drawing when Steiner is designing an old mystery site where the initiates had a connection to the sun, to the Christ in the sun. It's very wonderful. It's a red line going to the vertical, and then there is the sun and Christ is written in. This is what's happened in the past. And then he's drawing an evolution of time, and now we are there, or I don't know where, and we can look back to this. There is the mystery of Golgotha. If we are looking now to Christ, it is not like this, Steiner said, but we go back in time. At this time, we had to go in space, and now we had to go in time, from space to time, to find the Christ in the development of Earth. And it's a very wonderful drawing. And these drawings of these Easter lectures and of the Karma lectures and in the class lessons, this is part of this spiritual event, I would say, but now we haven't the blackboard drawings here. So an enormous element which happened, and he designed it, and then saying, but what was performed in autumn, people couldn't keep this in the materialistic impulse getting stronger, and the soul's force is weakened, and they were looking for forces which helped them to get an understanding of resurrection. And so there came to shift to the springtime, because then you can see how something is coming. But they lost the power to see it in autumn, where you can see it only spiritually, but not from your material eyes. So they brought together a spring festival tradition with a festival of resurrection. And now we have one, Steiner is not at all arguing against it, but saying we have need a deeper understanding. And it's one of the task missions of anthroposophy to bring a new awareness of this possibility of resurrection, the idea of resurrection of the spirit. And you know that he gave many lectures about the coming Michael festival. He never said we should bring now Eastern to autumn. No, he kept it, of course. But he said what we at least need is a Michael festival. Yes, consecrating the spirit evolving out of the dying nature or the dying civilization. Easter Sunday, I have to make it shorter. There is a starting lecture for going a little bit deeper in this, in the mystery of incarnation of man, saying we are all coming from the, we can say, the world of the Father. And this means, in a cosmic approach, we are coming from the cosmic forces of moon. The incarnating human being, and this was always told in the old mysteries, taught in the old mysteries, what gave the energy and the drive to the incarnation by the moon forces. And these were father forces. They are leading us into existence. Not only that, they are also forces who organize our physical form, our physical body, our formed existence. And these are forces of necessity. And they are working on the physical and etheric, the creation of man by the Father. And we can call this the first birth, the lunar birth. And then in very old cultures, there was an enormous awareness of when a man became 30 years old, man, that means man and woman became 30 years old, an enormous shift, a mighty metamorphosis took place, because now the solar forces appeared. He said today it is going in between. They are now not strictly divorced, but they are in each other. But at this time, they are working after another. And it was an awakening element of becoming 30 that there is a new level there. And these were in fact forces of liberation from this father world of necessity, a birth of the sun, becoming a sun man and woman, of course, a free man, a solar birth. It is very interesting. Maybe some of you remember that Christmas, as Willem Seilman said, my real birth was during the Christmas conference. I was reborn in the spirit. I felt, and he was exactly 30 years old. He was born in 93 and 30 years. This doesn't mean that he was an ancient man, but it's quite interesting that some people could, during the Christmas conference, feel a kind of a rebirth in the sun by the spirit, also the spirit of freedom. Very interesting. And the third birth was a kind of a Saturn birth. And Steiner said, which the Saturn forces, they sustains man when he passes through the gate of death. They hold him up, they carry him. So in a way, he brought these three huge planets or forces. And for the young doctors, it came then the next day, where is the implication for medicine or for our deeper understanding of human beings? And then he connects it to the mystery of Golgotha. I will jump beyond it and come closer to Easter Monday. He keeps the line with the moon secrets and said how old mystery sites, a lot of them, or the most, they had an enormous doing a kind of research in the moon secrets. I mean, the moon is a mysterious planet also because in former time it belonged to the Earth. So the moon forces now helping us to incarnate and to form us, they came from the Earth. So when moon and Earth were not separated, they were coming by the limbs. Now they had come by the head. And then Steiner is going closer to the mysteries of the forming of the ether body in incarnating. It's very interesting. He's saying if we incarnate, or in the time of conception on earth, there the spiritual ego and the astral body, they have to collect ether forces for the incarnation process. And these ether forces, they were collected. So the forming of the ether body in the moon sphere is described by Steiner on this Easter Monday. Very interesting, saying the ether body had an outer layer and an inner layer, and the outer layer is done by the light. But the light can't be a sunlight, it must be the moonlight. The sunlight directly is destroying the ether. It has to be reflected, but this is not only, as people say today, a mirror. The moon is only mirroring the sunlight, it's not real. It is a transformation of the sunlight, a real transformation, making it possible for etheric forces. So, and he's going deep into the mystery of this forming of the ether body and saying who is acting are those what Steiner called the moon beings. They are highly developed spiritual beings living in the moon sphere, and they are active in forming the ether body of the coming individuality in this cosmos of light. But the light element, in a way, how to say, modified by the planets. So now he's describing in detail how in this ether body of light, qualities of the different planets are integrated by these moon beings. Very interesting, also almost poetic, how he's saying the moon beings are observing Mercury, are observing Venus and their qualities, and they integrate these qualities into faculties of the etheric body on a light level. I just sketched this. And then going on Tuesday to Ephesus. This was very touching, also in relationship to the Christmas conference, that he came back to Ephesus. And exactly at this point, because he said there was never a mystery site as Ephesus, where there was so much participation in these incarnation processes, in this formation of the etheric body, in this last stage of coming to earth. And that's not only moon, we heard about it. Moon is the moon beings, they are in dialogue with the other planetary forces. And of course, they are also watching the sun. They are not directly incorporating the sun forces because they are for the eye and the astral body, and the ether body has to be protected from a direct influence, but it is all directed towards the sun and the planets. And there is this long verse, I won't bring it now, where Steiner is saying this is what can be heard in this building of the etheric body in this sphere of, in this moon sphere. So they got a kind of initiation towards it. And in Ephesus, they got really a feeling of the true dignity of man in the cosmos. Not only the dignity of the etheric body, but also a dignity of the etheric body in relationship to earth and to astral body and I. And there he say you can see this relationship in between moon and sun. Still today, we all know we have this data, this place of the Easter festival in the first Sunday after the full moon, after the spring point. So still Easter is an absolute relationship from the moon and the sun relationship. And Steiner said it's one of the last reflections of these old approaches to this mystery. So there is a strong relation to it. I will go now a little bit, but seeing the time really only a little bit to the young doctors. Maybe it's enough to say a little group who gathered, and directly after the Christmas conference was finished, they got a medical teaching on an esoteric level based on mantric verses, an esoteric core in their lectures. So the first time that a kind of teaching in the medical section happened, which was based on an esoteric core and for a spiritual group. So a first section group, a first group of listeners, a first group of beginning professionals who received the Christmas impulse directly as the first ones. So this was a tremendous experience for them. And we now try to understand it better after 100 years. What image of a high school Steiner had in mind, which he could exemplify in the medical field by the collaboration with Ita Wegman and the existence of those young medical students who asked for esoteric development. They really brought the question for spiritual development. And this is also the central theme in the Easter course now. Steiner welcomed them on Easter Monday and directly asked them, tell me about what happens in doing all these meditations which you given to you on the Christmas conference, that means in your medical course. He wanted directly go into a dialogue about their spiritual experiences as medical students, because these were meditations not for general meditations, but medical meditations, enabling you to get a better doctor or to perform your medical tasks in a more subtle way. And he wanted to hear out of them, and they were very shy. It was very difficult for them to tell about what they experienced. And so this conversation wasn't so easy at the beginning, some of them, but then they brought more questions than telling about their experiences. But what Steiner offered them, let's come into a dialogue about. But at the end, it became a wonderful second course, I would say, about what does this image of mystery, the mystery of man, of birth and death, this relationship to moon and sun and Saturn and the other planets, what does it mean for our medical task? How we can understand deeper what is a human being in physical, etheric, soul and spirit level in this cosmos. A new cosmic thinking of what is a human being, but also how can our method of bringing a diagnosis of, let's say, measuring fever or feeling the pulse here, if we do it really with the right inner perception to what is blood circulation in relationship to the sun sphere and the actual sun sphere, but also this also mean the sun sphere as a kind of an incarnation process of the earth entity. So the old Saturn still living in fever and the old sun still living in our pulse. So if we diagnose, Steiner said, correctly, it's in time and space. So, of course, it was all too much, but it was very interesting to understand how he developed a kind of teaching where this kind of realities of a mystery understanding of what is a human being on earth in health and disease was getting very practical. And maybe also a little element, because we have this Franz Kafka year. Franz Kafka died beginning of June in 24. And for me, it was really moving that Steiner was not talking about Kafka as a patient in the medical course for the young doctors, but at a certain point he said, now we have this disease of tuberculosis, which was also the disease of Franz Kafka, this horrible disease. And if we look spiritually to what happens there, it's not only that there are microorganisms, but we see as a general problem nowadays, the civilization is so materialistic that a lot of individualities have difficult to incarnate in a moral atmosphere. They want to bring out their impulses and into the practical, and that means also the moral sphere. But because the world is as it is, they were repelled in a way. They had to go back to their own being, and at the end, this force is meant to be directed to the world. They seize the lungs, or they turn. There's a shift of their direction to the own physical being. So, and then he's saying, when I look at a patient with pulmonary tuberculosis, I come into a very concrete compassion because our time is so materialistic, distracting man in the outer world from how his karma should be lived out in terms of destiny, pushing him back morally with our whole unspiritual life into his own physicality. Such things, he said, are not so important by the fact that one has theoretical thoughts about them, but that one can put oneself into them in the whole mood, and then which is the will to salvation arises. Very difficult how to heal a patient with such a situation if it's really progressed. But it was a strange, I would say, destiny that one of the listeners, one of the most gifted listeners of this course, went directly from this lecture back to Vienna and became an accompanying friend of Franz Kafka in the last weeks of his life, Norbert Klaas, and also then asked Ita Wegmann and Dr. Steiner how to support this man. Of course, it is not a lecture about Kafka, and we know that millions of people underwent tuberculosis, and it has something to do also with physical life conditions and infections and so. But he's describing a spiritual element, and I only wanted to touch it here because Norbert Glass was really involved, and Kafka was somebody in the spiritual history of the 20th century. This is not just a patient. There is no one on earth just a patient, but this man had a kind probably of a spiritual mission. He performed it. I mean, he did what he did with his spiritual life work, but as a patient, I think this is a very interesting description. And the last point to this course, I just want to mention, then Steiner said, still Easter time, the Christian impulse in medicine was never overtaken since then. We know that the first disciples, they went out to heal. They went out to heal, and they came back and then told Christ that they were successful or not. It was a teaching also in healing. He said, go to the man, bring the word. What does it mean, the word? It was a kind of an image of what is an image of a human being. Bring this kind of resurrection of the image, what is a human being on earth, and this is healing. Not only, sometimes we need substances and massage and eurythmy, they did not have it. But in a way, I think teaching and healing is connected, was always connected, education and healing. And it's interesting that when Steiner closed the Christmas conference, he sent out the members for heilkräftiges Wirken in der Welt. So for a healing capacity, single members, not all doctors of the medical sections, but anthroposophy has a healing element in itself. And I think we all experienced it in our biographies, that it has an uprighting, an enormous uprighting or even resurrecting quality as anthroposophy. And now he's saying, but the specific medical impulse of the Christian impulse was not really overtaken. What is living in the Gospel of St. Luke, he was a doctor, and this is not really, it never became a medical movement or a medical teaching. So what we have as a natural science since, it is not keeping the Christian impulse in itself. And what is the Christian impulse in medical science? Steiner in one sentence said, this is a cosmic approach to what is a human being. As long as we have no cosmic approach of what is a human being, this will never be a Christian medicine. Or the quote is, a Christianization of medicine will take place when things are grasped in such a way that one comes back to the cosmic. So let's say the example of what is the etheric body and how do we incarnate? And what about these forces? This has to do. And this is very interesting, and then I'll let the young doctors away. There was a little group, a group of young students, young doctors, and Steiner said, you have the chance to fulfill your own path of life with these impulses, these esoteric impulses. And if you do this, we will be with you. We, that means Ita Wegmann and him. There can be a community forming among you with us here, unter ihnen mit uns hier. Community building, but it needs a kind of an element, what is in the circle. Among you with us here. And he said to them, you can feel yourself belonging to the Goethe Ahnung. So what is the Goethe Ahnung? It is still the same question, is this the building or is it? But I think we all can feel what he meant, belonging to a place where such impulses were incarnated, where they get out, the Christmas conference, but also the Easter conference. For me, it's really a little bit sad that there is this Easter conference in our awareness. We're always talking about the Christmas conference, but we forget Easter conference and then we do an AGM. So in fact, this would be the task, to see what went on out of it, what Steiner did and what the sections did, because this was one of the formative sections, the medical section, and they came back after Christmas and they felt belonging to the Goethe Ahnung. In one sentence he said, sometimes it's very difficult to study naturalistic medicine, but you can heal from this medicine by the Goethe Ahnung. I mean, this is almost a little bit tragic, but some of them, they suffered really in their medical studies. I wouldn't say by biochemistry, but how patients were treated at this time, sometimes in hospitals, as a physical body, and how science was done as a physical body. And in a way, it's hurting if this is an individuality and not just a tuberculosis, also from the level of language. Healing doctors and students, not saying the world is evil and we are good, but in a way essential where healing impulses also for the profession comes out. He's saying now the materialistic power is there and we are, what is spiritually willed at the Goethe Ahnung is very tiny, but he said there can be a change And the suppressed groups will be the ones in the future, and the ones who have the power now, they will be substituted. And you have also said to them, and not only keep it in your own heart, but bring it to the public. What we need is a public opinion. What is medicine in society? What kind of medicine do we want to have? And not only for a special group with special needs, but the public opinion. Do something for the medical progress, not only for your own. And then very interesting, he said, and then you will be supporting pillars of the Goetheanum. In a way, they felt the Goetheanum as and the supportive pillars here, but in a way he reversed it and said, you are the supporting pillars of the Goetheanum. The Goetheanum is nothing without you. So a kind of a mutual relationship, no hierarchy. In a way, Steiner was also helpless, because an anthroposophical impulse can't work if there are not people incarnating it. So Steiner was totally dependent concerning the anthroposophical impulse on the co-workers. So they were decisive. And in a way, but for them, of course, the pillars. With the class lessons, I won't go into. We have, time is over, and also we have no class group here or internationally, and it is online. But just to understand 3 class lessons in such a short time, to focus on the Michael school, on the inner esoteric core. And also all these medical students heard it, that he said, if you become a class member, please enjoy to say, I'm representing the Goetheanum. Not I am the representative, but if somebody asks you, what are you doing? That you are really confess, not deny anthroposophy. So I am here, I'm doing something emanating from the Goetheanum. So this is a spiritual place. It's good if you have a publication and it's written your name and the Goetheanum beside, instead of avoiding the Goetheanum, really being there and staying there. It's risky. In a way, you won't get a professor then on Stanford, or I don't know if such articles are in the world, and the Goetheanum has still this relationship. But it is something coming. It is a seed for the future. And then in the 3 last lessons, he's going deep into thinking, feeling, and willing. In the 8th class lesson, deep into the human being, in the elementary realm, in the earth, in water, in air, in the warmth, in the spiritual realm, and in the 10th lesson, wonderful in the destiny situation. If what is a human being on earth, sometimes as we all feeling that we are living in the darkness and we are almost extinguished by the darkness. I wouldn't say maybe by our own biography, but let's say by the war, by what is going on, we feel extinguished as human beings. Humanity is extinguished. And we need a kind of a seeking to transcend this kind of misery. And then he's going to the stars and how we can feel what is weaving in the light of the stars, and that human soul can experience a certain consolation there. The starlight awakens us. And then going beyond and going to the spirits and their deeds in history or in presence, and that they call us also, that we are becoming active. A human being is a person on earth, can understand itself or himself as kind of a creative language of the gods, to perceive your own as being willed, as being intended. And doing this, he declares, he explains it in the class lesson, doing this in the right way. And then he's saying it brings us back to the point where the etheric body is formed. This is a meditation which is very powerful in the presence, but also has the capacity to connect us with these paths. Steiner was describing in this Easter mystery lectures about the forming of the etheric body in entering the earth. And this is from, he's designed from from the longer past. So just to get a glimpse of how all these elements belong together. And also the karma lectures, of course, I won't go now in all these biographies Steiner is sketching, and also not in the method. But it is clear that when he is describing these biographies from Pestalozzi till Hölderlin in those 10 days, from Julian Apostata till Basilius Valentinus, it is a tremendous access to world history, to what is a human being on earth and what is the spiritual anthroposophical movement. And he's saying we need this dignity of man in history to understand deeper our own tasks in the presence. And in one of the karma lectures, he said, how to develop this seriousness of understanding that we need. And then he said, follow up the Goetheanum weekly newsletter. What is there in the leading thoughts, this will be a path of making, transforming the society and moving into something real. And I end, as promised, with the building. And this is very touching, I would say. At the end, that means the karma lecture of Sunday, White Sunday, 27th of April, also 1 week after Easter Sunday. At the end of this karma lecture, he comes to a very interesting point. He said, our perception of nature, if it's a pure perception of nature, it is in a way losing itself. He's also saying the pure natural senses cause a depletion of the soul. In a way, we are drawn out and our gaze is lost in the infinite. So there is no end if we only adore nature. And then he's saying, you know, old architecture, temple architecture, had a musical, a moral dimension. It was a sculpture. And in a way, it was healing the sensory perception. Sometimes we have only the feeling that buildings are spoiling the landscape, isn't it? We say ecology would be fine if there were no buildings. So, but it's very interesting that the right buildings, they belong in a way to earth development. And it's such an interesting thought, healing the sense perception by the right organic, musical, poetic forms. So the way to the outer world and the way to the inner world, he's saying we also get lost inwardly. If we are only going into our own forces and we get lost, what we need for a kind of formative capacity inwardly are images. Images gave an access for a deeper understanding of what is human soul. We have to learn to meditate in images for the inner world. And if we do this, going to the outer world, natural perception, but also this kind of architecture or this kind of art, going to the inner world with this kind of image element, then there is evolving a space in between. And he's a blackboard drawing the space in between. And if we create this space in between, then he said we can handle what is coming from a destiny point of view, sometimes in a very hard way into our biographies. So we have to handle the blows of life, the shocks of life by karma and destiny. And there is a sphere needed of the human soul to handle an unexpected death, an unexpected accident, something which happens in politics. We need a sphere of how to live with these attacks. Some of them, some, not all, are by destiny. And an inner sphere of living with karma in between the outer world and the inner world. And then he is coming to the Goetheanum and saying, and therefore we need a Goetheanum for this inner and outer, and also for a karma place. And he said, hopefully it will come back soon, this Goetheanum. It is interesting and moving to read that Steiner had in himself obviously a hope that the second Goetheanum can be there on Christmas 24. We know that it was there on 28, which is for me personally a little a mystery, a Weltwunder. After Steiner died, they went on and created this building out of their own forces. This is for me enormous. But Steiner obviously hoped that at the end of 24, now we were talking about Christmas conference, Easter, and the model, and maybe 9 months to Christmas, there is an option. Now I want to close. I know it was too much. I know we never can grasp all these contents, but I hope we got a feeling of something which happened in reality here on the hill, but not only locals. The locals should know, yes, but also it was not only locally, it was for the world, and that there is a strong relationship from Christmas to Easter. That is, I wanted to say today, when many friends have stayed behind from our Easter event as a final word, Steiner said, at the end of the Karma lecture on 27. So that's the ending of this 10 days period. So from my side, thank you for your attentiveness, and also the Irish friends in relationship to Helen. I think what an image of going on Easter, going to the spiritual home, but also what co-workers on Heaven on Earth for our anthroposophical, beloved anthroposophical movement. And good to keep Dr. Steiner in mind, what he did, Christmas, Easter, and the course of the year. So I hope from the general section that we have the capacity to go on and follow this path in general, but also specifically this year. And insofar, greetings to the coming Easter days, but also to the Easter impulse in anthroposophy. Thank you very much for listening tonight.